Alright, welcome everyone. We're talking about video games. That's right, video games. I'm finally going to be able to talk about some video games more on my own time. Finally going to be dedicating a lot more time to do so. I've been wanting to for the longest time, but my regular channel, my regular solo channel, Zach Archer, started as a gaming channel years and years ago, but quickly became music focused, and that's where like the thousands of my subscribers came from. So I've experimented here and there throughout the years of like mixing in a variety of content. Talking about everything used to be a thing I'd like to do, but realistically, the people there are there for a certain thing. It's there for music-based content, so I feel like it might be better in the long run if I have separate channels to put things that people are actually looking for. So if you don't care about the music that I talk about on there, you can just subscribe on here. If you want video game content, you can just subscribe on my TV channel. If you want TV and movie stuff, or you can go to Tarkaron, Tarqaron, for a variety. That's a big variety of all the above, but also with co-hosts as well. So a lot of different shades. Now I'm not going to be posting like a video a week in all these channels. Essentially my goal is Tarkaron will always have videos out every week, and then I'll try to have at least one video out aside from that. So on any of my other 3 channels, I'll have one video out, not like one on each, because that's just unrealistic. So I'm going to go at my own pace. It's going to be about enjoyment, but at the end of the day, I also don't want to stifle growth in certain areas. And if it means starting from ground zero, starting from square one with no subscribers or whatever, it is what it is. You know, it'll come more organically than if I stifle the growth of one channel with a variety of content that people aren't looking for. That's all I'm thinking. And it'll be easier for you guys because if you want all of it, you can subscribe to all of it. If you want only certain stuff, you can subscribe to certain stuff. All right, there it is. That's my spiel. My spiel. Now this is gonna be fun. A trip down memory lane for the past year, 2024. When it comes to January, I always like doing end of the year content. Whether it be on Tarkaron or my own time. Last year, what I did was just one big tier list on my other channel with like everything I finished that year, which included movies, TV shows, video games, and albums. But this time, I'm doing separate videos for each. And here today, I'm going to talk about all the video games I finished in 2024. This will give me time to talk about each one individually, while also seeing what it looked like my year as a whole. For the breakdown, this is the most amount of games I've finished in any year ever. Which I know some people probably beat this number every year, but for me, this is a very big accomplishment. And this is the first year I can say for myself that my goal next year isn't to play more than I did this year. There was always a goal for me is like I don't play enough. There were years where I would only beat like 4 or 5 games, up to like 10 at the most. And then it was like 2022, I beat like 11 games. 2023, I think it was maybe 20 something, and then now I've been 31 games this year. So my goal for 2025 is about 25 games, which is actually less than what I did last year, because I think I went pretty over the top in a good way. I don't think it was too much, but it was just right for me. So my goal isn't to play more quantity wise, it's to play like just as much, experience new stuff, because I experienced a lot and a lot of great games. There's a mix of longer, meatier games and some kind of garbage games in the mix as well, which is kind of what I like to see. That's the kind of flaw with setting a number goal, like I want to beat this many games, because you can kind of fill it with trash if you wanted to. You just kind of got to be honest with yourself if you want to like give yourself a real accomplishment. Maybe mix in some of the meatier games that you've been wanting to check off that backlog. But here we are. I want to start off by saying, I beat 31 games, 5 of which were on PS5, 14 on the Switch, 5 on PS4, 4 on the Wii, 2 on the GameCube, and 1 on PlayStation 2. So, this is probably going to be a general trend, as most games are beaten. PS5 and PS4, if you can kind of combine them, that's 10 games there, and then 14 on the Switch. That makes sense. And Switch games can tend to be easier to beat, just because if you want, you can do it handheld, and it's more palatable that way. Much easier to just get in, get out type of games. But yeah, I do want to mix in more older games because I have a huge backlog of GameCube, Wii, DS, 3DS, all that I barely touched. I did 4 Wii, 2 GameCube, 1 PS2. But we'll talk about it. I have the games here in order of when I finished them in the year, and we'll talk about them. We got a tier list S through F, and let's see how it shakes up. First up is a game called Theatrhythm Final Bar Line. I played it on the Switch. It was funny because when I went to buy it, my go-to is I'll always go for PlayStation over Switch if I can, because it's just more powerful. If you want to do trophies, that's cool. Certain games lend themselves better to Switch. They just happen to not have the PlayStation 1 in stock, but they did have the Switch one, and so I was just like, whatever, I'll go with the Switch one. And it's also not like visually amazing or super, needs a lot of power to it, and it probably lends itself to a little handheld experience as well. So that was cool. It was fine on the Switch for sure. No complaints with that. As far as the game goes, it's amazing. This is an easy S tier. If you like rhythm games, Theatrhythm Final Bar Line is the game for you. I don't know what to tell you. It's one of the best rhythm games I've ever played. I think it's got to be one of the best rhythm games ever made, period. Just take the catalog of music alone. Now, I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan. In fact, this is the year I beat my first mainline Final Fantasy game. And I still have such a fondness for the music. It's just like transcends the medium to the extent that I loved so much of this music. And it was such a treat going through every single title, as well as a bunch of spin-off titles. Some ones not included, like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, My Life as a King. If you're a King head, sound off below, because not many people played that game, I'll tell you what. But ironically, as not a big Final Fantasy fan, that happened to be one of the ones I did play. Like, very random. But that's the sim guy in me. It's like a city life sim type game, so city building sim, if you will. But yeah, there are a couple that aren't in there like that, really fringe picks, regardless. But they did give a lot of love to spin-offs I didn't think would be in there, and it was really cool going through all of them. And it's one of those games I can easily go back to. I had started going through every song, trying to get the highest rating I could get for each one, but ultimately moved on to other games, and it kind of fell to the wayside. But this is a game we beat very early on, January of this year, so I love it. It's amazing. Next up is Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus on PlayStation 2. It's one of those rare times where I'm playing the original on PlayStation 2. Not only did I not play like a remastered version or anything, but Sly Cooper is also one of those weird ones where there was only a remaster on the PlayStation 3, if I'm not mistaken. It was like the Sly Collection on PlayStation 3, which I don't have. And I don't think it's particularly easy to get your hands on. It's not like the most accessible game. I could be wrong. So I played the original. I'm just surprised they haven't done a full remaster collection more recent than that, because nowadays you get remasters like every generation, and that's just like the one they left behind. But Sly Cooper, I had a lot of fun with it. It's really cool. I mean, I love platformers, and it's a platformer, but it does some really cool things that not a lot of platformers do. It like kind of jumps between different genres and different styles, different mechanics it throws in to spice things up. Worth noting, I did beat this for a Gens Challenge, which is a thing we do a Discord I'm part of, where I put it on. I kind of host it every couple months, where you get paired up with someone randomly, And you'll get assigned a video game or 2 video games from your backlog to finish within a 2-month deadline. If you beat one, you're a gent. If you beat both, you're a supreme gent. If you beat neither, you're a rascal, and that's a failure. So Sly Cooper was one of the ones I had gotten assigned for that, and I'm grateful for it because it would have taken me forever to get around to it. Especially being like a PlayStation 2 game. It's so easy to fall into, as I was even saying with the numbers for this year, the most recent consoles, PlayStation 5 and Switch for me. It's easy to go to them. And of course, there's the newer games, and they're more top of mind for what you want to get finished. But yeah, so I'm glad to have played it. Sly Cooper, I'm kind of torn on where to put it. I'm going to say A. I want to say A. It's one of those things. It's another thing with playing games throughout the year and then ranking at the end. So you really realize how much time is like just in a year. I'm already like struggling to really fully remember my feelings when I played the game. Theater of them really stood out, so that was more easy. But even when I was doing like a ranking, because we do a top 10 video on Tarkron of like all the stuff we finished in the year, it was just tough to give it to some of the early things, movies, games, whatever, that we finished like January, February, because it just like seems so long ago. But next up is Overcooked, which I played with my girlfriend. Is one of the classic quintessential co-op experiences. It can be super frustrating if you're not on the same page. But it's so good. I mean, it's so simple yet highly effective. One of the best, like, purely co-op experiences I've ever played. So I want to say A for that as well. I played a lot of good games this year, so it's tough. But we actually played this on the Overcooked All You Can Eat edition, which she got because it was on sale. She got it on her Switch, and so that was a cool collection. It came with Overcooked 1 and 2 and then all the DLC. So we beat 1 and 2, but still have all the DLC to go. And then I basically consider, once we finished all the DLC, then I'll consider the Overcooked All You Can Eat edition finished. But there's a lot of extra content in there. Now this next one is a weird one. It's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But I'm not going to rank it based on the game alone. Because if you don't know, I'm a big Smash fan. I literally, before this year, had put in over 700 hours in that game. The thing is, I just always, 90% of the time, focus on the multiplayer aspect. And so I had never beaten World of Light, the main story mode. And that's what I did this year. Finally beat that. So based on my rules of like finishing it in the year, I would technically be able to put Smash like right at the top. My favorite game on the list, all that, essentially. But I'm going to rank it solely on World of Light, just to be more realistic, because it's not like I first experienced this game this year. I've been playing this game specifically for years and hundreds of hours, so it's just the World of Light. And for that, I'll give it a B, because it's pretty fun, but it's also like it feels very cheap compared to like other story modes they've had in the past. You just can't help but feel like, man, we could have had something more, like a Subspace Emissary type story mode. Because I'm sitting there and you have these like scuffed, like the characters in the game in a certain color. They're supposed to look like some completely different characters, just like to try to shoehorn them in like as if they're represented in the game in some way, but not really. With the whole spirits system and everything. Not in love with it. So it's B, because it's still Smash you're playing at the end of the day, so can't fault it too much. Next up is the game I mentioned earlier, Final Fantasy 16 is the first mainline Final Fantasy game I've finished. So I think if I look at my whole list of Final Fantasy games finished, it's Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, My Life as a King, Theatrhythm Final Fantasy, Theatrhythm Curtain Call, Theatrhythm Final Bar Line, and now Final Fantasy 16. That's where I'm at with it. So Final Fantasy 16 I had a lot of fun with. It's not without its flaws. The people often point to the pacing, to be a little odd. Some of the combat can be repetitive, and it's really up to you to mix it up. And there's only so much you can mix it up. I still have fun with it. Sometimes you need a little simpler combat system, but it can definitely be repetitive. Some people point to like a lot of the side quests as being stupid, which I was just talking about this recently. I'm one of those weirdos who, like, unironically, I completely fuck with all the weird side quests. In almost any game, any RPG, I fuck with the weird, like, stupid stuff. Like, oh, I'm in the middle of saving the world, and you're gonna ask me, can you, like, help me find some a piece of paper for my arts and crafts project? It's like, yeah, of course, absolutely. I have nothing better to do. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go collect 50 flowers from this random field. Shit like that. You know, it's not exactly that, but it's things in that same vein where it's like, there's probably more important things I could be doing with my time, but yet I'm like the most powerful person in the world, essentially, it feels like, and yet I'm gonna go and just collect flowers from this field for you. Sure. But I kind of like that stuff. It has fun little elements where it helps build the world a little bit, and it's just kind of just funny as well. But I was a big fan of Game of Thrones during its heyday, and so I love how it's very Game of Thrones inspired in the story, but then it's contrasted by the crazy over the top boss fights, which are absolutely insane. And I'm totally here for those as well. So I'm going to put an A tier, Final Fantasy 16. Now, I have an ongoing ranking on, if you want to see my individual reviews that I type as I'm beating the games, or you can see the games I've been playing, if you go to a website called Backloggd, that's BACKLOGGD.com. You can track like all the games you're playing, and then you can write little reviews of them, just like Letterboxd for movies. And if you want to check that out, you can. I also, throughout the year, will have an ongoing ranking of every game I've finished, and I move it around as the year progresses, as my feelings change. I don't know if this will even line up with that. I'm not even going to consult that. It's just going off of vibes right now. And I never did like an S through F tier of these, so it's interesting. Next up is Overcooked 2. I'll just put that right above Overcooked. I don't have like particular feelings. Like, it's hard to really differentiate, especially when we're playing this collection that includes both of them and it's all together. It kind of bleeds together. But the only one thing I do remember is that Overcooked 2 introduces the throwing mechanic where you can throw the food across, which I think is fun, adds a fun new layer. And so, without really assessing it, it feels like Overcooked 2 is just a slightly better Overcooked. So tell me if I'm wrong. Next up is Princess Peach Showtime. I had some hopes for this game, but they kind of let me down. Big time. I had decent fun with it, but really, more than most like platformers that I've played, this is one that, well, I don't even know if I would really describe it as a platformer. It's like an action game, whatever. This is one I couldn't really recommend to adults. It's specifically geared towards children, it feels like, which is a shame. Because it's like, oh, the Peach game, it has to be, easy, It has to be easy for kids. Not for real gamers, of course. That's the vibe it gives, and it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. So for me, I've heard some people like it a lot more than me, which is cool, but for me, it didn't work too much. I had a little bit of fun, but the challenge was ultimately, there was no challenge there. Some of them were really like nothing. Like, it felt like nothing to finish them. And then the little silver lining I had going into it as I was playing, I was like, oh, it's kind of fun to collect the collectibles in each level. And I would like to go back and like collect everything, at least have an added challenge through that. But some of the levels aren't set up so great for it, and the game itself is not designed very well for completionists' sake. Some levels, it's like you go past one screen, like one frame, and then you can't go back. And then once you pass that collectible, you have to start the whole thing over again if you ever want to get it. So it required multiple playthroughs of the levels sometimes for me to get all of them. Even when I knew they're somewhere around here, it's just like if I took one step into the wrong screen, then I messed up and I have to start over. That's one element. And then the fact that like the game itself doesn't do any favors for you in terms of being able to easily hop around to collectibles, easily jump in, jump out, get collectibles. Like I said, some of these levels are really almost on rails in how they progress. Like you kind of keep moving, and then you miss one. You might stick it out and get a couple more, but then you have to restart the whole thing. So it made it so like I was completely bailed on the process. I was down initially to collect everything at least to see if that gave me some more challenge, but it wasn't really worth it for me. So I'm around a C or a D for Princess Peach Showtime. Objectively, maybe it's more of a C, but I'm going to give it a D because I kind of found it insulting. Because it's like, of course, the one girl character for Mario gets a new game after so long, and it has to be like the most insultingly simple, childish game with no challenge to it. You know, maybe that's harsh. Next up is a game called Smarty Pants on the Wii. This is one you can't really beat, but for the sake of like including it in lists like this, I consider it finished because it's essentially a trivia game where you can compete or work together with someone else in trivia, simple trivia. But it was actually pretty fun. You know, I didn't find it anything egregious about it. I will say, yeah, it looks like it's a family game, but some of those questions are really not family, like that a lot of family members, younger family members would be able to answer. Like it's really some deep cut trivia in there. But for what it's worth, it was fun. And yeah, I'm not insulted by it. I'll put it in C for now, see if that feels right. Next up is Bust-A-Move Bash. Now, I'm a pretty decent fan of Bust-A-Move. I've liked the games in the past. There's not much deep to it. You matching colors. You're shooting the orbs. I'm sure you've seen, if not Bust-A-Move games, there's a lot of games that imitate the same mechanic of the little shooter at the bottom that you tilt the angle, and it shoots little colored orbs, and you match it up with other colored orbs. Bust-A-Move Bash somehow managed to take a very simple and easy concept like that and make it a bad game. I don't know how. What I found like particularly egregious about it was like, yeah, the concepts, the base game is there. You can't really mess that up. You're shooting the orbs and you're matching the colors. That's it. But it's the kind of game where it's pretty mindless, not too deep. You want to be able to get in and out. And for some reason in this, you can't do that. You have to, like, once you start playing, you have to play through, sometimes it was like a solid, like, I forget what it was, 20 levels or something crazy in a row before you can stop. And there's no easy start and stop point. And, like, you're moving through different, like, levels in, like, this little map. But there's not really anything different to them. You know, you have, like, a different character shown. But nothing else different. But for some reason you're constricted. It's not like you can just play one, get in, get out, play a couple, however many you're feeling. But no, it would actually become a chore because I'd be stuck there to finish so many, and there's so many, and it takes so long sometimes. And then there was just no care to adding any sort of depth to it, anything extra to make it stand out. This is tough. I mean, it's not good. I'm like low effort games like that. I'm just gonna give it an F, even if it's not like the worst game in the world. The fact that it put so little effort into something that, and its core, like already, it's pretty much a copy and paste the style of the game, and so you'd think you would want them to add a little more content, or obviously just quality of life improvements in general. Not make you stick out like 15 to 20 of the same thing over and over again in order just to save your progress and get out. Hogwarts Legacy is an S tier game for me. I'm going to put it at the top for now. I loved this game. Truly, down to my core, I love this game. There's one annoying mechanic where you make a decision in the story later, and it blocks out the option to use a certain spell, which really annoyed me because it made me feel stupid, and maybe I was, but I didn't think like me choosing one option would make it so I could never learn a certain spell. But that being said, I loved my experience with it. I thought it was a beautiful game. It was, as a Harry Potter fan, like I watched all the Harry Potters, but then more recently, a couple years ago for Tarkaron, we reviewed all the Harry Potters again, so it got it more fresh in my mind. More fresh Harry Potter fan, which I'm glad I did so that I could really fully enjoy this game even more. There's just so much care put into every detail in this game, and it's really a wonderful experience. For Harry Potter fans, it's essential because you go into Hogwarts and there's so many details just in Hogwarts alone. It's so cool to just explore Hogwarts. There's so much to it. And then that's just only a fraction of what the game has to offer. You go out and the world is feels even bigger than I ever expected. Because when I thought of this game, I'm always thinking, like, is it all just set in Hogwarts? But then I play and find out the map, just like your typical open world game these days, it's got so much on the map that you can collect, so many different things. I made a point to do all the side quests at least, and I still had a ton of stuff on the map that I had to go back and finish that I said I would. But with a lot of these games, I'll say that and then I don't, and I haven't yet. But I'm looking forward to, because I believe I heard they're going to do a sequel, which makes sense because it was the best-selling game of the year, and acclaimed in a lot of ways, of course. It's amazing. One of the best RPGs I've played, maybe ever. To be honest, I don't know how it translates to if you don't know anything about Hogwarts. Obviously, the game isn't for you specifically. It's kind of like a love letter to Harry Potter fans. But I have to imagine that you would enjoy it all the same, because it just does still have a rich world to it that you can, I feel like, enjoy as a standalone experience. But as someone with a little Harry Potter knowledge coming into it, seen all the movies at least, I got more of an appreciation for it, that's for sure. And it's magical. It's a magical thing. It's like what Harry Potter fans have always dreamed of. It's like you can go into this world, and it's absolutely, it fulfilled everything. And I remember when this game was being talked about before it was released, when there was only hints of it, I was not this optimistic at all. I had no hope. It was like we were barely seeing anything of it. I'm like, okay, we'll see. I was like, it's probably gonna be crap. Did not have any expectations, and it smashed it, absolutely. Resident Evil 4. This is another Gents Challenge game I was challenged to play, which is great because it's another one where I don't know when I would have gotten around to it otherwise, and I've been meaning to. The original Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. And it was great. I found myself thinking that all it was missing was just a little bit of polish. It's hard to pick up a game like this 20 years later to play for the first time and really to be able to fully enjoy it as it was intended. Because you can try to put yourself in the headspace of when it came out, but at the end of the day you can't because you're playing it now. So I have like all these experiences like a Hogwarts Legacy, which are like so much more polished in comparison. It's tough. But for what it's worth, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it did really good at setting the atmosphere. I really loved how it used, as someone who hasn't played much Resident Evil at all before, I liked how it used limited ammo to make you have to get creative and use different weapons. Like, you could show preference to certain weapons, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to use all of them at different points, which is cool. And like I said, I feel like it was just missing that little bit of polish, the modern day polish, which is exactly why I'm excited in 2025 to really set out to play Resident Evil 4 on the PS5, the remake. So I've heard great things about that, and I feel like that has the potential to really skyrocket this game to the upper tier. It's tough. This is tough to rank because like it's probably an A tier game, right? Like just by design, but it felt more like a B tier experience for me right now. Let's put it here for now. I could definitely move it up. Next up is Sackboy. What was it? A Big Adventure on PS5. First of all, I thought this really looks really nice. For a platformer, just showed off what the PS5 could do, like visually. But for some reason, it just didn't work too much for me. I don't know what it was. Usually platformers, I get a good sense pretty early on if I'm going to be hooked on it. This one just felt more of an obligation to finish than others. As someone who loves platformers, that was weird feeling for me. It was kind of weird, like the vibe. I guess that's the Little Big Planet vibe in general, but it had like musical levels that use like licensed music, like random like pop song. It was very random song choices. And it just felt like a weird vibe to me. It wasn't like a vibe I was looking for. So for me, it's nothing to write home about. Not horrible either. It's one I feel like I probably could appreciate more in a different time. But for now, I'll just put it in C tier. It's better than Smarty Pants, though. Next up is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Now, this is a cheat code, but I'm going to put it at the top. Because most of the time when people ask what's my favorite game of all time, it's Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door on the GameCube. They had a remake for the Switch in 2024, and I knew I had to play it. I wasn't going to miss it. I wasn't going to push it back to another year because it's a big game for me. So by default, it's kind of at the top. Whether it's like objectively better than a game like Hogwarts Legacy, I'm not sure. Like I really wrestled with that in my mind. Like, should I actually put it below that? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it really reaffirmed what I loved about the game. It's got a lot of charm. The writing is really nice. It's funny. The world has a surprising amount of depth to it. The characters are really likable. The designs are unique. It's a fun world. The chapters are all fun. It's like one of those things where if you aren't the kind of person who likes to read a lot of dialogue, or mostly that. If you don't like to read a lot of dialogue, it probably won't be for you. Because I feel like to get the full experience of the game, it's really, you get it from talking to everybody. You can use Goombella to tell you about literally every screen in the game. She has unique dialogue to say. About every character, she has something to say. So I think that's where the game comes alive. The combat system is still one of my favorite combat systems. It's simple but effective. The action commands, being able to time your button presses. I love it. And it's a lot of fun. It's a special RPG, and it's one of those ones that right up there with Super Mario RPG, which would be a good starter one if like you're new to RPGs as well. So, highest recommendation. Check it out. Now there's no excuse anymore. Next up is a game called Nine Monkeys of Shaolin. This is an interesting one. This was kind of a spur of the moment. I saw it on the store for, it was like $4 or $5, something really cheap. Maybe even lower. So I had this digitally on the PlayStation Store, and it's a beat 'em up, but really cool. It's like cell shaded but stylized, and they do really cool things where have splash like screen effects. Ultimately, my problem with the game is there's not too much depth to it. They have like skill trees that you can level up with different skills you can learn and improve certain weapons and stuff. But ultimately, to me, it felt like all that was kind of like fluff. It didn't really matter too much because when it came down to it, you could be pretty repetitive with the combat. You don't have to do much. It's fairly button mashy, but I still really enjoyed it considering like the experience that it was. Visually, I think it looks really cool, and there's something so satisfying about the hits. So I think the sound design lended itself a lot to that as well. Like, bam, the hits really hit. And it was fun. It was good, mindless fun. I'm going to give it a B tier. Alright, B tier. And it might be a little high even. But it's just like, I don't feel like it suffered enough for me to bring it down lower. I don't know. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. I think I'll put that in S tier. It's an excellent game. Oh shit. my favorite Tony Hawk game is Tony Hawk's Underground 2, which is kind of a black sheep of the franchise. The Underground games in general, if you like the Underground games, you probably like the first one more. That's what people often tell about. And it's story-wise, it's kind of cool. It sets itself apart. And I just understand why. But Underground 2 has always been my sweetheart, my go-to. I love the little goal system in there where you go into a new map and you have all these different characters with different individual goals for you to do. And this was like the Viva La Bam era, with like Bam Margera in skating. And so he's very prominent in this. So in that way, I could see it turning people off. But I mean, I like that kind of that vibe. It was just like over the top, fucking shit up type things, and not just skating. There's some obviously just skating challenges, but then it's like fucking released a bull from the cage and shit like this. Over the top nonsense. Okay, I'm talking all that about Tony Hawk's Underground 2 as if I'm about to rank that. All that to say, the original Pro Skater games are iconic, and I perfectly respect them for that. And then this one is perfectly polished remakes of the originals. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Really good. They feel amazing. They look amazing. Hard to complain. Hard to complain here. The only reason it might not go as high as it might have is because I feel like I played this game mostly a year or two ago, and then I just kind of finished it off. Like, I finished off the second game this year, so I didn't spend too much time with it. So for the year, it's not as high, but I'm still giving it an S tier. I mean, it's excellent. Oh, here we go. We got a couple of shit games coming up. And then by a couple, I just mean two. Don't you badmouth the third. All right, if you're looking at the video. I don't know if you can see that. But next up is Carnival Games on the Switch. I had such hopes for this game. Like, I like a good mindless mini game collection if it's done well. Obviously, most of the time with like the Switch and the Wii, they aren't really done well. But Carnival Games, I had seen the name on the Wii for so long. I'd heard it. There were a couple different games that I was like, it has to be pretty good, right? And then they made a whole release on the Switch of it. So I played it on the Switch, and it was god-awful. God-awful, like one of the worst minigame collections I've ever played. Truly, like, not only were the minigames all bad, I did not enjoy a single one, but there was barely any content. Like, you breeze through it in 1 or 2 hours, and then you're supposed to replay games just to collect stupid clothes for the awful little avatars in there. Wow, I was surprised by how bad this game is. That it felt like it had a right to have a remake or a remaster, whatever you want to call it, on the Switch. It was like, wow, that was insulting to me. Let's put it right at the bottom of F. Next up, we have Garfield Lasagna Party, which is right there with it. Awful game. What it tries to do is be Mario Party, but with one board design, and it's very poorly designed. There's nothing interesting at all about it. It's really bad. Again, really bad minigames. There was maybe 1 or 2 I kind of enjoyed in this one versus Carnival Games. And but just blatant ripoffs. Some of the mini games are blatant ripoffs of Mario Party, but done very poorly. And then the board itself really void of life. So for me, I can't remember if this is how I ranked it initially, but my vibe is that it's slightly worse than Carnival Games, or no, I mean slightly better than Carnival Games. See, I don't know. It's a toss up between the two. They're both absolute garbage. I would never recommend them. It wouldn't even be a fun laugh at the game type game. It's just misery. So I give it the little edge just because it has a little different, like at least it has a board game feature, even if it's awful. I don't know. Next up is Cars 3 Driven to Win. And on instinct, when you see that, you might think that it's probably going right down there with them. But I want to tell you that Cars 3 Driven to Win is a little gem to me. It's a little hidden gem on the Switch, which is funny because it's so readily available. I don't know if it's for you, but everywhere I go, I would always run into this game. Cars 3 Driven to Win, and like bargain bin type situations, usually a discount. I've just seen the game floated around all over the place. And I expected to be garbage as a result, obviously, naturally. But really what it ends up being is a little bit of a hidden gem. I will say, I don't know if it's just the Switch. I think there are other versions of this game. So I don't know if it's just the Switch performance, but really, sometimes really scuffs. Like the frames are dropping like crazy. In that way, yeah, it's lacking a polish that would really make it interesting. But it has a lot of fun and unique mechanics for a racing game I've never seen implemented. If you know, like the original Cars movie, they made it was a whole bit about like backwards driving. Mater showed Lightning how to do backwards driving. And they somehow incorporated that into a whole mechanic in this game to where you can, at certain parts of a track, you can flip your car around to get like an added boost and do backwards driving. It was really interesting. And then there's other stuff like you can go up on one wheel, you can do flips in the air and stuff. It was pretty cool. And the thing I always felt was holding it back was the performance, because you could feel it in like every little movement, just frames dropping, just not super smooth like you'd want it to be. So it's tough. Because I look at B tier and it's like, does it belong in that tier? No. But I want to put it in B over C because let's do it. Let's put it in B for now. I wish I could fit this all on one screen here. Like, this is what my tier list is looking like right now. I just think some of these Bs might move up to A. That's what I'm thinking, but we'll see. Astrobot. My love. The GOAT. Astrobot. Genuinely, I love this game. For the very few games I played that actually came out in 2024, it's up there. It's Paper Mario 1,000 Year Door. It's technically my game of the year, but Astrobot, as far as a new experience, is easily my game of the year in that regard, and I think it's so deserving of the title. It's really good. It's beautifully, like, you go try to play Cars 3 Driven to Win. You might appreciate it as a gem, but then go to Astrobot right after, and it's just like the juxtaposition of the two, like the amounts of polish and the performance of each is just crazy. Because Astrobot is like silky smooth, beautiful. PlayStation 5. Again, I loved Astro's Playroom, and that was perfect showcase of the PlayStation 5 controller, and Astrobot just does that even more. I loved this game purely. It was a joy. And I think it's one of the few games, if not the only game, that you can stand up there with the Nintendo platformers as like on par with them. Like talking 3D Mario games, it's like up there. You could compare it to that fairly, not be like, oh, it's easily not as good as them as with most of the 3D platformers outside of Nintendo. You can say amazing, highest recommendation for platformer fans right there. And this is someone who isn't like a huge Sony fan, like going back years. Like a lot of these references the game prides itself on aren't exactly like going right to my heart. Really cool. But yeah, it's like even without that like Sony bias, I'm loving it. So if you're a Sony fan, even more so, you'll like it. Super Mario 64. I did a review of this on Tarkaron. I'm inclined to put it at the top of B tier for now. It's great. Easily of the 3D Mario games. So here's the thing. On Tarkaron, we're going to be going through all the 3D Mario games. So far, we've only done Mario 64 and Sunshine. But Mario 64 is the only one aside from Mario 64 DS, I think, that I actually hadn't finished of the 3D Mario games previously. And so I don't have the same nostalgia that people have for this game. I've played it here and there throughout the years, but never finished it. Finally did. And my takeaway is that, yes, it's the 3D Mario game that shows its age the most by far. Like, it's the hardest to go back to, and you just look at the pure designs of the levels and stuff. It's rough in comparison. But for its time, it's amazing what it did, and it's amazing that now, even now, the movement options that they have for Mario, they still feel amazing, and it's still an incredible achievement. Because I think that's why that it's such a popular speedrun game, because of the different movement options, like the long jump, side flip, back flip, triple jump. There's so much cool stuff you can do. Wall jumps in this game alone. It makes it feel so good. It's just fun to jump around in that world, and that's at its core what you want for a platformer. The other stuff, the cosmetic stuff, the design, the camera, not great. That stuff's gonna hold it back from me being able to put an S or A tier in the year 2024, now 2025. But I still give it all the props in the world for sure. Next up is Castlevania. Talking the original Castlevania, I played this on what's called the Anniversary Collection on the PlayStation, which is pretty much, I think, a direct emulation of the original. So much so that you can get the same glitches that you can get in the original. Like the game can just crash. It can just freeze up and be like, eh. I've had that happen multiple times throughout playing it. And then you just have to restart. It does give you the option to do the save state stuff, so you can like save it wherever and not have to go back. This is my proudest gaming achievement of the year, that I beat this game, because I haven't beaten many of these older games, definitely not recently, and they are a tough challenge, and I did it without doing save state nonsense. Like I didn't just like cut out like any consequences of me dying. What I did do is like wherever the checkpoint was, I would save after that so that I could reset there without having to like go through the lives and go through the whole process of doing that. So just for that sake, I did that. But I endured having to get through every checkpoint authentically, not like stopping right before this challenge and stopping right for this, which I've seen some people do. I think if you really want the authentic experience of these old school retro games, that's kind of what you have to do, is give yourself. It's a brutal challenge sometimes, and I really struggled with the final boss. It was absolute doozy, but I did it. Castlevania at its core, I really like the gameplay style of Castlevania. It's gonna be hard for me to put it much higher than a C, because I really think it is tough, and sometimes it was more tough than enjoyable. But generally, I like the gameplay loop of it, how it operates, and so I'm interested to see newer titles, to see like if they improve upon it or how it lends itself to a modern game. Because I've played Metroid Dread, games like that, but I haven't played like a newer Castlevania game, so I'm interested. But very proud of myself for sticking that up and tackling that beast. Next up is Shrek's Carnival Craze Party Games. Shout out to Shrek one time. We're going to put you in the top of F tier for the reason that the game is rough. I will say some of the mini games are a lot more interesting than the other two mini game fiends at the bottom of F tier. So that already puts it above those. But then it also does add in these scuffed original cutscenes between the characters when you after you finish a certain amount of games or whatever. In the story mode, you get these scuffed looking, really wild little cutscenes that I did not expect to see. So it was a nice added touch, even if it was scuffed. So I give it credit for that. But at the end of the day, it is kind of a mindless party game again. All the same category there. But I'll put it at the top of F. I can't really go much higher than that. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2. Wasn't a huge fan of that. I think we could put it at the bottom of C tier for now. It's not that it was awful. Like I really enjoyed playing Budokai growing up as a kid. I always played Budokai on the GameCube. And then later, Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and 3 on the Wii were the particular ones that I had the most time with. Budokai 2, I remember we rented from Blockbuster once upon a time, but never really played it too much. And then now I finally bought Budokai 2 again more recently and played through it. I want to say there's a board game esque element to it, to how you navigate in the story mode. I want to say that's interesting. It adds an interesting element to it, but it really doesn't, and that's kind of the thing I struggle with. It seems like it's a weird way they move it around. It's like you move your little guy around a little path in like a board game like fashion, and then that's how you go to like start a fight with another character. You can grab little items and stuff. It didn't really add anything to the game for me. And then the core of the game, to me, there wasn't anything really interesting about it. It felt pretty button mashy. Fighting games aren't my thing in general, I feel like, because I just don't have the patience to learn all the longer combos and whatnot. And then if I realize that I can just button mash or do a couple simple moves, that's what I'll stick with, and that's what I did with the game. So there wasn't much to it, and probably not my cup of tea outside of being Dragon Ball Z. The Quarry is a game I reviewed on Tarkaron as well. It's one that it carries a lot over from Until Dawn, but I think it does a lot of it just slightly worse. And ultimately, I'm not walking away hating the game at all. There's some stuff I really liked about it, some really creepy stuff, environmentally really cool, but I think it missed out on some of the really great camera angles and direction choices that Until Dawn had. So ultimately, I think I'll put it in C, right below Castlevania. But check out our review, very in-depth, that we both share our different opinions on it. He enjoyed it more than I did. Next up is Ghost of Tsushima, which is another game I had for a Gents Challenge. Hogwarts Legacy was as well. So I get some amazing games checked off my backlog that I wouldn't have otherwise because of the challenges. I'm grateful for that. Ghost of Tsushima is going to go right up there in S tier. Right up there in S tier. Look, Theatrhythm being one of the best, if not the best rhythm game ever, is currently number 5. I think that's probably as far down as it'll go. But that's kind of amazing. There are 4 other games that I think are better than it. Arguably. It's very different than a Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima, beautiful. One of the best looking games I've ever played. Even I played the PlayStation 4 version, and if you had told me it was the PlayStation 5 version, I wouldn't have batted an eye, because I wouldn't know the difference. It looks so good. And I love the music. I love the whole vibe of it. The story is really nice, some likable characters, and the open world really tastefully done. He's got the same open world style as a lot of them, just like Hogwarts Legacy. Tons of stuff filled on the map to go and collect. But they all have the feudal Japan culture infused into it in a really cool way. Like compose a haiku. It's like literally a thing you can collect. There's one where you're striking bamboo. There's one where you can do like showdown, like a duel with someone. There's fox dens, like all these cool things, the way they incorporated that culture into it and make the world really interesting. Love it. I beat this months and months ago, but I'm going back currently right now. I'm playing through, trying to collect more of the stuff I didn't. I still have a bunch of quests to do and the DLC as well. So it might show up again next year for the DLC. We'll see. Super Mario Party Jamboree. It's exactly what we want for a Mario Party. It's a real return to form. After Mario Party Superstars, which was a re-release, it was like, where are we going from here? The Super Mario Party title threw me off. It got me worried, but ultimately we landed on a great product with some mini games that did not have very much thought put into them. I'll say that. There's some really great mini games, but there's some games that are stupidly flawed. You can kind of actually break, and they're actually so dumb that they didn't workshop them more. But still so much fun. And just mechanically, they could really improve a couple things. But I love, like, there's some iconic boards in here, like the mall, which really stand out. So for me, I'm going to put it in B tier, right in the middle of B tier. Okami on the Wii, another Gents Challenge game. I played this like right after Ghost of Tsushima, And my biggest takeaway was that the controls were kind of annoying, having to do the brushstroke. I found so often. I don't know if I'm dumb or what, but I just was constantly messing up. I was doing the wrong thing. It was not working. And it became really frustrating at points. There was that, and I also felt the game to go really long to the point where it overstayed its welcome. And that was without me collecting a lot of like extra stuff you could have done, like taking on some more beasts out in the wild and whatnot. And then there's like weirdly a pervy little character alongside you, so it like artistically looks like this beautiful hand-drawn style for a game. And then you just have this guy who every female character you come into contact with, he's super pervy about, like, look at them knockers on that girl. Basically, literally comments like that. But I really appreciated the Zelda-esque aspects of it. Just not, I don't know. Some stuff didn't work for me as much, but I did enjoy it. So I don't know where to put it. Let's put him atop of C tier for now. I don't know. I say for now. I think I'll probably just ride out my vibes if it looks right at the end of it. Don't want to stress too much all the ordering. But Leo's Fortune is a game we did for Tarkron in a series called Bargain Bin. This is the first installment. So essentially it was my choice. We're going to alternate doing it, where I get to pick any game that's $5 or less for both of us to buy and then review the following week. And so we would play at least 3 hours of the game, or until completion, whichever came first. This is a really short game, so we both beat it, and the consensus is it is not good. I thought it was going to be something more interesting, but it turned out to just be a mobile game from a decade ago that was ported to Switch recently, and it doesn't hit. Maybe as a mobile game, maybe it did, but mechanically there's really not much to it. I can't imagine it being good as a mobile game either. But as a Switch game, definitely not. So I'll put that in D tier, below Princess Peach. Sea of Stars is another amazing game. I think for me, I might put it at the top of A tier. It definitely could be S on a different day. It's really, really good. I love the characters, love the world, love the whole vibe. A lot of heart. You can tell there's a lot of heart put into it. Some really heartfelt moments. I love the combat, how it's just like Paper Mario. You got this timed button hits. That's kind of all you need for me to be totally sold on a combat system for an RPG. And I'm here for it. I totally get the hype. I'm glad I got to play this again. I'm glad I got to play this for the first time this year. And such a treat. High recommendation for me. And especially for like a Chrono Trigger fan. Right up there. You will love the game. Touch Detective 3 plus the complete case files. Now this is an interesting one. I played Touch Detective 1 and 2 on the DS years and years ago, back when they first came out, when I was a wee lad. And I remember loving them. Like, they were always like near and dear to my heart, those games. I never played 3 because it only came out in Japan. And then years later, they do this Switch version. I never expected it, and it really was like, wow, I want to get back in there. Like, I'm excited to play them again and get to play 3 as well. What I found upon replaying is that the games still have a lot of charm. I love the character designs, and it's a fun little world. But I feel like in today's age, it's hard for me to recommend it fully because there's so many other like detective-based investigation style games that have more depth to them. Where these are pretty straightforward, probably more kid-oriented type detective things. You know, you're playing as kids essentially doing it, and some of the humor is very much that kid-oriented humor, and some of the stuff is so simple that you think it probably is. That's kind of what's detracting for it now, playing it years later. But it's not one of those games where I play it years later and realized, man, it was garbage, and I was just like in my child rose-tinted glasses on. No, I still appreciated what I liked about it before. Put it at the top of C tier, maybe bottom of B tier for me. I'm not sure. It's tough. I still have a lot of fondness for it. The music is cool and catchy as well. Lastly, one I played right at the buzzer, December 28th of 2024, is Celeste. And that's an amazing game. Sorry, guys, that's an amazing game. I'm putting it at the bottom of, or right above Pro Skater in S tier. It's the exact type platforming I love in a 2D platformer like that. It takes like what's some of the toughest levels from Mario Wonder, like that final level after collecting everything, the super tough, tight platforming level from there. Takes that and kind of incorporates it throughout the whole game in a very cool way. It was so satisfying, and it almost never got to the point of super frustrating. It was always, because it's not like you make your way all the way up and you mess up one jump and you have to start all the way at the bottom. It's like there's pretty frequent checkpoints. So you always, like, basically the screen you're on, if you pass that screen, you're safe for the next screen. And so it's always just overcoming that next step and that next step. And thematically, with how the story incorporates it, and that it's like a mental journey for our character to just overcome the next challenge, and how they encourage you in the game, like, view your death counter, that they prominently show your death counter, view it as a badge of honor rather than something to be ashamed of, because like you kept trying. That's the theme of the game, and it's simple, but it's pretty, it's poignant, and it's effective. So that story mixed with the tight platforming, where you really have to use everything in your toolkit to get from one spot to the other. That's the beauty of it, and it's really effective. I'm just gonna let it rock right there. There's the tier list for 2024. All the games I finished that year. What do you think? I think I hit some amazing games this year. Amazing. Some stinkers as well, but for the most part, great stuff. Like, pretty much, C tier and up, I enjoyed. And, if I was re-rating stuff, maybe I would move some of C tier up to B, but it just feels right for now, Let me put Budokai 2 down to D. And that's it. I don't want to mess with it too much. But an amazing year for me. Again, I'm going to just try to match that, go for 25 more games, a mix of meatier games and shorter games. I have a really good mix here, a lot of different, some big RPGs, as well as platformers. Got a rhythm game, got skateboarding game, racing game, a lot of good variety in here, and from good to bad, a really memorable year for sure. Like this S tier right here, and some of the A tier as well. S and A tier are all ones that are like gonna be in some of my favorite games ever that I remember for years to come. So beautiful. Hope you enjoyed my little ranking here. I highly recommend trying it if you haven't beaten like 95 games. If it's something like this amount, it's fun to kind of like go through everything that you've experienced in the past year and do a little ranking. But the ranking's not ultimately what I'm caring about so much as revisiting everything and contextualizing the whole year for me. So thanks for watching, checking out the video on the channel. Subscribe for more just like it. And more video game stuff on the way. Who knows what I'll talk about next. All right.